Thank you, Katharina.
Hello. Yeah, so I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker. His name is Mr. Schleicher, and he's a very renowned scientist and statistician, which comes close to me because I also studied statistics. Mr. Schleicher is a very esteemed director of the OECD, and he's further very famous for his PISA studies, which you've all heard of. He's critiquing the educational systems and became very famous for that. And this even led him to gaining the Theodor Heuss Prize and becoming a professor, a honorary professor at University of Heidelberg. So please, everyone, be happy and yeah, have fun listening to Mr. Schleicher. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, hello. Thanks for the kind introduction. It's such a pleasure to join you here to talk a little bit about, how education around the world is going digital, but also how do we educate for a digital world? And that was already the topic in the preceding discussions. I think a very relevant kind of issue, what knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values, including critical thinking, do we need to be fit for this digital age now? First of all, the pandemic has done a lot in this. Schools have finally woken up to this digital world that has already fundamentally transformed learning. If you look around the world, personalization, that's the most obvious part. While you study mathematics on a computer, the computer can now figure out how you learn mathematics and then make your learning experiences so much more granular, so much more adaptive, so much more interactive. We've seen just an amazing range of applications here, serving students with different needs, including special needs in ways that was impossible before. You look at game-based learning environments, making learning fun. Also, that is a really interesting new feature, that actually this engagement part, making learning more interesting, engaging. Virtual reality, embedding learners 3D. Now, why would you want to listen to your teacher explaining the results of a scientific experiment where you can do that in a virtual laboratory? Those kinds of more action, agency-oriented pedagogies are now getting real play. Or augmented reality, beaming in the virtual world into what you do in vocational education and training, are very powerful tools. Medical studies, you can now do, things that are dangerous or, difficult to do in the real world. The biggest controversy probably is still around, robots in classrooms. And I must say, I have my doubts about that too, but there are some areas where, they have been transformational. Think about language learning. The only way you will never learn a foreign language is by having someone talking to you about grammar and vocabulary. Now, languages we learn through interaction, and that's where actually robots are very, very good. You can actually interact one-to-one in a way that you couldn't do in a formal classroom setting. Now, well, here's an interesting case from Japan. What they figured out is that children often learn better when they explain things to others than when they have others explaining things to them. And this is again where, robotics is very, very good at making and enabling this. Big issue also, how we use technology for assessments and evaluation. I would actually say, one of the biggest mistakes that we made in the history of education is to divorce learning from assessment. We ask you to pile up years and years and years of learning, and then one day we call you back to do your exam in a very contrived, constrained, artificial setting. And often that is making learning so superficial, so reproductive. In this time of ChatGPT, we shouldn't teach people answers. We should teach them how to raise the right questions, not to reproduce the established wisdom of our times, but to question it. And again, this is something where technology can help us reintegrate learning and assessment in ways that we haven't done in the past. I really think that's a very, very important angle, that, seamless integration with powerful learning analytics. You go to, places in Korea, in China, where you see an amazing range of analytics being deployed. Teachers can now see in real time how different students learn differently. And then, study those patterns, revise advanced pedagogies, tailorize learning environments, even in fairly large classes. Now, I think it's a very, very powerful development that we have seen in new environments. And then, of course, nowadays you add artificial intelligence into this picture. And I know, today we're probably all quite disappointed by, those AI-based systems. Now, ChatGPT, you ask a question, you get something thrown at you, and you never know where that comes from and who constructed it and what elements it contains. But, that's something that we know how to solve. Even current models of artificial intelligence will be able to solve that issue of traceability, and giving you a good understanding of where the answers come from. As the training data expand, accuracy will improve. Now, like for humans, artificial intelligence is usually models are trained on limited data set, but as those data sets get bigger, your accuracy will improve. So I wouldn't worry so much about those things. Now, if you look a few years down the road, probably AI is going to get better at interpreting our queries, understand not just what we say, but what we actually mean, and then also adopt a more human writing style. The bigger question is, what is it going to do in the long term? Now, will AI ever get around the problem of inherited bias? No? Like humans, training data are usually limited, and AI then amplifies, accelerates from that. No? And that's a big risk, and to lead to biased kind of judgments. And same for humans. But I think this is an area where some scientists say, yeah, AI is going to figure that out, developing things like human intuition. Others say, no, that's going to be a long-term constraint. We don't know that. But the near and medium-term scenarios are pretty well developed. No? So what does this mean for students? No? Well, AI is already supporting learners in amazing ways. Now, first of all, helping you discover new learning resources, helping you discover new worlds of work. I think we shouldn't forget that either. That actually you can now, do a virtual internship somewhere. You can actually discover multiple kind of profiles. You can write your job application, your college application in ways that, you couldn't do possibly before. You can learn, you can practice, you can apply in many different kind of learning settings now, even if you're not in school. We've seen that during the pandemic, where AI-based learning systems have created quite powerful learning environments. Now, you can create and share. And last but not least, and I think that's really important, you can take greater ownership over what you learn and how you learn and where you learn and when in your life you learn. At the moment, we try to cram everything into the initial years of someone, and then, we leave them on their own. Maybe in the future, we're going to distribute learning in a different way. Modern work environments are also great environments of learning, and good, learning environments have become very good in anticipating the evolution of skill demands. If you look at the teachers, very same thing, First of all, technology is reducing administrative work already, and that's really important, because when we survey teachers, you could see that in many countries, teachers really complain about administrative work as the biggest source of stress. If you add 1 hour of teaching, that's the black line here, you induce a little bit of stress for teachers. Now, teaching, working with students is not the problem for teachers. But if you add 1 hour of administrative work, that's the green line, you raise the stress level by a lot. So, and this is where technology is actually really, really good at. So one promise. And then, also teachers can prepare their lesson plans. They can, discover new resources in ways they couldn't do before. They can engage in coaching, feedback, with the learning analytics I just showed, and also assessment and evaluation. So huge potential on the supply side as well. And then, it has, of course, opportunities, transforming learning, but also challenges, mainly around ethics and equity. We heard that in the preceding discussion, actually. If you study the opportunities a little bit, you can look at them, in terms of personalization. That's the big promise of technology. And then tech enablement. Our traditional learning environments are not that great on either side. Now they just, put people into classrooms. But, personalization in itself is not about tech. You have some very traditional tutoring environments that are very, very good, very high quality, very personalized. The problem is they're very difficult to scale, because human relationships are difficult to put on a larger scale. On the other extreme, you have tech enablement without much personalization. I must say, actually, a lot of digital learning environments fall into that category today. They look very fancy, but they're not doing actually much better and much more than what you get in very traditional settings. So if you want to transform learning, you really have to think about, how you reconcile, reconfigure spaces, people, time, technology, relationships in entirely new ways. That's really where the future of learning lies and where technology gets at its best. On the challenges side, very clearly is the, first of all, the access experience. Now, how do you tell teachers, how do you tell students, what kind of applications are available, how they work, what are the benefits, what are the risks? Now, I think that's really, really important. And finding the pioneers, people who are very good at that in your system, spreading and scaling their expertise. And then also, engaging more in developing guidelines, guardrails that help us to make more sensible use out of new technologies. After we invented cars, very quickly we invented seatbelts and road signs because we wanted to make cars actually serving us, not killing us. And we haven't really engaged very much in this in the field of artificial intelligence. At the moment, teachers are not really very much part of that kind of process. And I think that's going to be really, really important to solve that puzzle. And then, last but not least, let's get us back into the digital reality. One of the things that we need to acknowledge that in most education systems, technology intensiveness in classrooms is often negatively related to outcomes. Now, just throwing computers into classrooms can get you worse results than working in a very traditional way. And many education systems have not moved beyond that point. And we also know that where teachers are not really part of the design of those technologies, they really are very good at implementation. So how do you bring educators into that process of design is very, very important. So in conclusion, smart education is not about the technology, but about how do we, reconfigure the spaces, the time, the technology, the people, when, everything can be achieved when, good pedagogy is powered by technology. How do we shift the focus from the technology to the learning activity? Now, make devices present, but not visible, not distracting. Actually, some of the best technology applications, you don't see the technology. It's just producing learning analytics, but it's not, directing students to screens. How do you use artificial intelligence to empower rather than disempower teachers? Both is possible. Again, learning analytics can super empower teachers to be creative designers of incredible learning environments, but also it can make learning more scripted, more reactive, more passive. It can stereotype student behavior. And so teachers make judgments, based on what happened to similar students before. So this is really important to cultivate a more innovative, friendly ecosystem where good ideas can, develop, spread, scale. To have a level playing field, that's also really, really important. At the moment, the environment is quite monopolistic, unfortunately, and also ensure that this is governed by ethics, by transparency, by reconciling data protection with the free flow of data, by investing resources far more strategically. Technology requires a long horizon, and then also, last but not least, invest in capacity. If we get those things right, we have a fair chance to actually advance education through technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andreas. And thank you also for joining our next panel, which we'll jump right into.